In philosophy, there are these moments of such great importance that it not only changes the tradition as a whole, but how we see the world. There are lines run in history where someone ushers in a new age of thinking: the Socratic period, the Enlightenment, and now the Postmodern period. These are huge shifts in the understanding of humanity. They create completely new understandings of what it is to do philosophy. In order to give us a better sense of what postmodernism is, let's talk about what it isn't. The term itself is actually pretty vague, and encompasses many different philosophies, and extends to many other fields. Postmodernism is not Marxism, it's not moral relativism, and it is not the declining of the West. One of the biggest and most vocal opponents of postmodernity is Jordan Peterson. In fact, a good portion of people only know the term postmodernity from him. Peterson uses the term postmodernist as a derogatory title against any philosophy which he's against, usually Marxism, which is ironic because postmodernism rejects Marx and Marxists postmodernity. Instead, he uses the term neo-Marxist to describe the evil professors in academia and others on the left that are destroying Western civilization. Peterson wrote a blog post in 2018 to clarify his view of what postmodernism is. He states that postmodernism is made up of two ideas. The first being that there is a number of ways that the world can be interpreted and perceived. The second is that there can be no canonical or objective interpretation of the world derived from these interpretations. This definition seems to be lacking any of the nuance found in the work of postmodernists, but it's one we can certainly work with. Following this definition, Peterson immediately claims postmodernists hold a canonical interpretation of the world. He says, "Since no canonical manner of interpretation can be reliably derived, all interpretation variants are best interpreted as the struggle for different forms of power," which is just Marxism. He also accuses postmodernists of lacking any kind of ethical system and morals, or any kind of coherence in their writing, which could be solved by him actually reading some of the authors he constantly refers to when speaking about postmodernism. He has an incredibly strange and contradictory idea of postmodernism, and I urge any Peterson fans to stick around to hear about some of the very interesting concepts in history that created this period of philosophy. In the 20th century, philosophers decided to begin looking back at the assumptions made previously during the Enlightenment. Thinkers of the time, like Kant, Rousseau, and Descartes, began to be scrutinized for their notion of objective truth and universality of certain facts. These fundamental concepts of modern Western philosophy were being scrutinized on the basis of ignoring very blatant biases: power dynamics, historical narratives, and the simplification of human existence. This, combined with our radically shifting society, where our main output was no longer products but services, led us to the postmodern era. Jean-François Lyotard was the first to define postmodernism in his book, The Postmodern Condition. He creates an incredibly simple definition that we can use as a starting point. He states that postmodernism is the incredulity towards meta-narratives. So let's break that down. First, what exactly is a meta-narrative? The meta-narrative is another invention of Lyotard. A meta-narrative is a universal theory of everything that attempts to encompass all of our knowledge and experience towards a single unified goal. Let's illustrate an example. Take the meta-narrative of Marxism. Marx stresses the entirety of human history being a class struggle, the working class against the bourgeois. All of human development can and will fit into this framework. According to Marx, the progression towards communism is inevitable because of dialectical materialism. The collapse of capitalism into communism does not need active effort to come to fruition. It is already written into the conditions of society. Meta-narratives have been a prominent feature of history. The Enlightenment, the American Dream, even Freudianism, they all give a framework in which to view the world and promise an inevitable end goal to their philosophy. But we can see definite flaws in these ways of thinking. The Enlightenment, promising freedom and sovereignty through knowledge, is now destroying our world with overconsumption and the continuing rise of totalitarian regimes. With millennials becoming the first generation to earn less money than their parents, and housing becoming more and more expensive, it seems to be all but dead. A lot of this stems from the evolution of capitalism. The Western world is in a post-industrial economy, or an economy in which the driving force is no longer the production of goods, but rather the production of services and technological innovation, and the subject of a future video. We no longer rely on factory work and tangible goods to bolster our economy. The advent of mass media and technology have transformed our main outputs into language and symbols. To understand how this came to be, we must look back, like 3 centuries back. Back to the Enlightenment and the emergence of our modern capitalist system. The Enlightenment era began in the 17th century when thinkers like Kant, Descartes, Hobbes, and Locke were envisioning a brand new world, one of freedom, progress, and prosperity through technological innovation and the spread of neoliberalism. Descartes set a foundation for all of science to be built on top of. Hobbes and Locke created the moral and governmental frameworks that the entire world now bases itself on, and Kant reformed the philosophical tradition. This is the society of the 18th century, one of scientific discoveries and technological innovation. Neoliberal democracy and capitalism are swiftly taking over the world. The Enlightenment project is in full effect. Yet the promises that this project brought have been left unfulfilled. The atrocities of the French Revolution, and then later the Holocaust. The atrocities of the French Revolution, and later the Holocaust, showed us that we are far from peace and freedom. The scientific project has not been completed. In fact, it is still being regularly attacked in the philosophical tradition. Something in this movement went wrong, and it is up to the postmodernists to figure out where the issue lies. Now that we've gotten a short overview on how we've gotten to this postmodern moment, I'd like to expand a little bit on Lyotard's definition. Postmodernity must be more complex than just the death of meta-narratives. Because of the death of the meta-narrative, we have to start questioning everything. We have to question objective truth, reality, and with that, science and scientific thinking. We must question language and its role in everything we do. We must question power, culture, and identities. Everything is up for interpretation in this world we've created for ourselves. Nothing is stable. That's the first question we have to contend with. Is anything objective? Can we truly know anything to be fact? This question is pivotal for the postmodern movement. Thinkers like Jean Baudrillard and Jacques Derrida will begin to argue that no, there is no objective reality. Both of these thinkers and their thoughts on reality deserve separate videos, and they will be coming in the future. But for now, I will give a brief explanation on Baudrillard's critique of objective reality, since I think it's the most pertinent basis of postmodernism. Baudrillard sees our modern media landscape as all-encompassing. In his essay collection, The Gulf War Did Not Take Place, he claims that the Gulf War was closer to a simulated event than an actual conflict. The event was hyper-real. The false image was more real than reality itself, to the point of blurring the lines between reality and simulation. The media spectacle of the war, with constructed storylines, curated imagery, and information control, was completely fake. The American media made sure the public knew about how moral the United States was for this war, how superior our forces were, while downplaying the real tragedy, destruction, death, and suffering that was caused. Baudrillard's hyperreality is pivotal in understanding postmodernity. We're no longer living in just a reality, but a world where our main production is of simulations. We live amongst them. We're unable to distinguish these simulations from reality. This is Baudrillard's definition of postmodernity, defined by the production of simulations and how we are impacted by them. All of us are simply derivatives of these simulations. All of us are amalgamations of the images and codes we want to be perceived as. This is just one branch of the tree that is postmodernity. And while I think it's particularly important, there is plenty more we can and will talk about. So for now, I leave you with this. Begin to question everything around you, how you're being shaped by your place in society, the simulations you view, and how everything is trying to feed you a narrative. Be curious, and start analyzing everything, because that is what postmodernity is really about.